But good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today in today's session. Obviously, there are a lot of new faces from across the country today, including some familiar ones from Capital One and also some friends I see from my last company. So glad to have you all here. We have a very important and serious discussion today on a topic that impacts us all, particularly as we look at the context of this year. My name is Nashe Alexander. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And this is my fourth Out and Equal Summit. Obviously, it's my first virtual summit. And I am a Black cisgender woman who identifies as an ally to the LGBTQ plus community. I'm also a millennial, a new aunt, and a DEI practitioner. So really excited to join you and be here with all of you today. I am a senior diversity inclusion and belonging manager here at Capital One, and I'm really excited to be joined by two of my awesome colleagues today, Meredith Kreitzer, and Angelique Morris, and am really active with all of our BRGs at Capital One, but particularly our Outfront BRG, which is our LGBTQ plus BRG. We know that nearly 60% of US employees experienced mental health concerns last year, and yet 8 in 10 of them don't seek treatment. And this is largely due to shame. Obviously, today's conversation impacts us all. And over the last couple of years, the topic of mental health has really gained increasing awareness. Employers are paying attention for really good reason. Approximately 1 in 5 adults have some form of mental illness each year throughout their lives. And we also know that mental health awareness affects everyone. So this is individuals, caregivers, and organizations that really want to make sure that their employees are healthy, safe, and productive. And including mental health in the conversation about diversity, inclusion, and belonging is very important to help us to educate, destigmatize, and create the opportunity for genuine empathy and dialogue. So obviously the first step in breaking the stigma is simple. It seems simple to talk about it, but it can be really hard to talk about something that you can't see. Mental health conversations can be particularly difficult in communities of color and other marginalized groups, such as the LGBTQ plus population, which is why we're here today joining this discussion, who face additional stigmas, biases, and in many cases, lack of access to important resources. So as I mentioned, I'm joined today by both Meredith and Angelique, and they have really been brave enough to start the conversation. So I would love, Meredith, if you could introduce yourself to our audience, along with, followed by Angelique.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith Kreitzer. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm joining you today as an ally. I'm super excited to be here. I know we had some technical difficulties, so I apologize for that. But I'm here to share my personal experience navigating my own mental health, specifically how that has impacted or intersected with my own career. I've worked, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've worked for Capital One for a little over 8 years, originally in our legal department, and then for the last 2 years in our card risk office, supporting risk assessments. I've had some awesome opportunities while I've been here to participate in our capabilities, business resource group network, both as a mental health advocate and as a founding member of our neurodiversity work stream, which provides support to our neurodiverse associates, including but not limited to those on the autism spectrum or that have ADHD, for example. In 2015, I was formally diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And while I am very candidly super nervous, if I'm being honest, to be so vulnerable with such a big audience, or any audience for that matter, I am here doing so today in hopes that, you know, sharing a little bit about my experience and what that has looked and felt like, and kind of where I am today, in hopes of you know, maybe being able to help someone else, because I some of the things that I think I'll be describing, I felt very alone at the time. So that's me.
Sorry, I was muted here, Meredith. What year Out and Equal Summit is this for you?
Yeah, sorry. This is my first one. Yeah, I'm super excited. It has just been like an awesome outpouring of like love and support. So I'm really excited.
Great. Thank you so much, Meredith. So it looks like we may have accidentally lost Angelique again. So while we're waiting for her to log in, we'd just really love to start today's session with some level setting. And we know that employees are increasingly coming out about their challenges with mental, oh, there she is. Angelique, are you with us?
I am here. My video's still not working, but I'm here.
Great. No, you're great, Angelique. Awesome timing. We actually just started. So I would just love if you wanted to give a quick introduction to yourself.
Yes, I am Angelique Morris, she, her. I identify as a bisexual woman who is disabled, and I'm also African American. And my connection to mental health is very personal, as I am diagnosed as having several mental illnesses, but also I drive the mental health work stream for Capabilities, which is Capital One Disabilities Resource Group. And so really excited to be here and partake in this discussion, and sorry that there were some technical difficulties, but happy to continue on.
Thanks so much, Angelique. And you joined just in time for the first question to go to you. So we were talking through about how employees are increasingly coming out, and so that's a play on words here, but coming out about their challenges with mental health at work. Why do you think that that's happening now? What's changed?
Yeah, I think that we're in an age of people really owning their identities as a whole. There's lots of conversations around diversity and inclusion in the workplace. There seems to be a completely different level of social acceptance. I think this year in particular, due to the pandemic and people finding themselves working from home and work and home life and being a parent and all of that overlapping has made people really take a look at how they're caring for their own mental health. And in turn, that means being able to own the fact that maybe they are dealing with having some form of a mental health issue if they were having that prior. I also think that when we're talking about really accepting ourselves, there's a piece of you that has to start including all aspects of your identity. So like, I know for me, I probably did this in the opposite way of most people. Of once I was diagnosed and had to accept that I was disabled and going to therapy and really talking through what that means and really owning who I am in all aspects. For me, that also meant owning being a bisexual woman. Not that I ever hid it, I just didn't discuss it. So I found myself being willing and able to clearly say, I am disabled. I have a diagnosis of a mental illness, and this is how it affects my life. And I think a lot of people are finding themselves in that same way of saying like, hey, I'm living at work right now, and I really need to discuss with you that this is why this is more difficult for me, because I also deal with anxiety or depression or some other mental illness as well.
Thanks so much, Angelique. And we're going to talk a little bit more about your experiences, particularly as a bisexual woman coming out also with your mental health challenges a little bit later in today's discussion. But I also am curious, as I'm going to transition over to Meredith, as we're starting to talk more about these conversations related to mental health in the workplace, there's often a turning point where you recognize that this is something that you need to talk about more. Could you share about what that turning point was for you as you started to think more about your own mental health at work? You are on mute, Meredith.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. That's the catchphrase of 2020. I have to say. I don't know how anybody else feels about that. No, great question. Turning point when I realized. I actually didn't realize it in the moment, but in hindsight, I have. But just put it all out there. I was struggling at work. I knew that I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, thoughts of not being good enough. I am very high functioning, so I know that outwardly I am like the happy, smiling, bubbly person. But thankfully, in my previous role, which is pretty fast paced, I had a great manager who, during the course of one of our regular sort of check-ins, I think he could sense that I was off. I, at the time, was just kind of running. And, it's like the hamster wheel in your head that's kind of spinning all the time. And I think he sensed some keywords from me that gave him a little bit of concern. And he just flat out asked me, based on some of the things that I was saying, are you having suicidal thoughts? And I remember very vividly and distinctly just responding, oh yeah, like it was nothing. But it was a really, really dark time when I was going home at night. And I'm so, so grateful that he just asked me that really, really tough question, because he helped me realize that maybe I wasn't okay, and I couldn't even realize that for myself in the moment. And I was saying things like, oh, I have to go to this meeting, and I have to do this, and I have to do all these things because I have this on my plate today, and it's like we got to keep going, right? And he just looked at me and said, Meredith, there are very few things in life you have to do. This is not one of them. And so thankfully I immediately was so grateful. And he's like, you need to go home, take some time, go home. Like, I'll call you tonight. We'll figure this out. I remember thinking like, oh, please don't tell anybody, right? I was immediately embarrassed and nervous, but grateful to be going home. On my way home, I had one of our employee assistants, associated relations specialists, reach out to me and just asked me how I was doing. Was I okay? Where was I going home to? Literally on the way home from work. So I'm really appreciative of that. I spoke to my manager later that evening, and he just said, I don't really understand what's happening. I said, I don't either. I was in therapy. I was on medication for anxiety. I was doing the things you were supposed to do. So I didn't know what was happening. And as someone a perfectionist that loves control, it was a very scary time. So I'm so grateful for his support. He helped me realize I needed to take some FMLA, which I leveraged. I was out for 3 weeks, and it's exactly what I needed. And I am very, very, I believe I'm here today because of his sort of support and just caring.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Meredith. I know that's a really personal story for you, and I'm grateful that you took the time to share with all of us today. I'm also curious, coming back to work couldn't have been easy. Was there anything that surprised you when you came back? I know that you mentioned that you had to take some time off for FMLA and your manager had checked in on you, but was there anything that surprised you when you came back to the office at Capital One?
Yeah, mostly that it was okay. And I had so much fear. And I talked to my manager, while I was out pretty, regularly as I needed to. Well, what's the plan? What am I going back to? Well, what about my work? Well, what about this? And he was very, very supportive. kind of said, well, what do you need? You know, what are you expecting? And, you know, really helped kind of ground me in what was true and what may just be sort of some of my fear and anxiety. But I asked, you know, one of my coworkers asked me, like, why were you out? I didn't tell anybody. I was not demonstrating sort of behavior that would suggest that I was in that state or having a mental health crisis. And so I was very concerned about how that would be perceived, and if I would be perceived as risk or as weak, rather. I was scared, but he told me, you know, nobody else gets to know that information, only as much as you want to share. And I didn't know what that was at that time. It certainly wasn't something like this. But I returned and everybody just said, welcome, we missed you. Hi. And we picked back up. It was I thought it was weirder than they did. Obviously they were concerned, and some select people that knew, but it was okay. And the thought of taking time and needing time, whether I knew it or not, was way more scary than actually doing it.
Thanks so much, Meredith. I know, Angelique, you mentioned earlier that you are a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And so I'm really interested in learning more about what were the unique challenges that you faced as a Black woman, as a bisexual woman, talking about mental health, particularly as it related to work?
Yeah, you know, I think for me, it's interesting because I feel like I struggle with the fact that as a Black woman who has bipolar disorder, like, and is bisexual, that what I'm finding is there are times where the similarities of neither one of my bi identities are real. And so either there's the assumption that I'm straight or that I'm not disabled, just because of how I present and the fact that I have a child. There's also the additional stigmas that are attached to each of those identities. I don't think that sometimes either one of those things are very much understood by the individuals that I'm talking to. And so it has been particularly interesting to navigate around showing up and saying, like, here's who I am, because then there are a lot of questions that follow, and sometimes not with the best intentions. And that, so it's not the questions that follow, it's usually the intent behind it. And I know that I've particularly struggled with having more personal conversations. It's very easy for me to stand in front of hundreds of people and, you know, really talk about mental health and why we should be taking care of ourselves. Not so easy when those are one-on-one conversations, because, you know, people feel more comfortable asking you to peel back additional layers than what you may naturally do. And so I think just the similarities of just not being understood, coming from a background that people just deny these things exist, has made it really, really challenging at times. Less in a large scale way, but more in personal interactions, more so than anything. Just having to continuously combat, like, this is real, this is who I am. I find myself saying a lot, that's really not how that works. And that can be discouraging if I didn't have the confidence to, like, know who I am and how I'm affected also by being bipolar. It would be extremely frustrating. I remember even so much as having Capital One share my story through some of our internal pages, and some of the feedback I got back was that I was waving my crazy flag high. why would I have to discuss that? And to me, that's very true to the experiences that I've had when I've shared with people that I am bisexual, of like, but are you? And are you just like saying this because it sounds nice? And or it can be very frustrating, to say the least. But I move forward because, one, I do have a child and she needs to see that I am confident in who I am, but also I don't try to let other people define what I know to be true about me.
Thanks, Angelique. And you raise a couple of different points, particularly around misconceptions of what mental health looks like or mental illness looks like, as well as the importance of breaking the stigma and taboo of talking about mental health in the workplace. So as you both know, I'm relatively new to Capital One. I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary, but I know that you both have been with Capital One for several years. And I'm curious, Angelique, have you seen a shift in how mental health is discussed in the workplace at Capital One?
Yeah, I definitely have. One thing for sure is I was diagnosed in 2016. Like Meredith, I had a mental health crisis at work. My crisis was very different, as I had a manic episode and had racing thoughts and was very hysterical because I didn't understand what was happening, as I didn't know at that time that I had a mental illness or several mental illnesses. And so returning to work, I felt isolated and alone, and it was difficult to find resources, and it was difficult to find anyone to talk to that either didn't pity me or it just was hard, right? There was no place, and I'm doing all the things. And, up to this point, I know Capital One had been very open about talking about your identities and diversity and inclusion, but I could not find anything about mental health. And as I started digging through and researching and realizing just how prevalent mental illness is, it became clear to me that not having the conversation was not the right thing to do. And so I decided that once I felt better, I would do that. And that's how I started Gray Matter, which is the mental health work stream of Capabilities BRG. And so, talking to various people, HR and leadership, initially there was a lot of trepidation around how do we talk about this at work, and what if someone shares something and it requires us to act immediately, and are people really going to be that open? And I heard those things and I said, I hear you, but it was important to me to do it anyway, because that's just also my personality. I'm a little hard-headed. So I forged ahead, and within the next year, that year I was invited to sit on a panel through what was then the Women's Business Resource Group, and it was about mental health. But then I realized I was the only person of color, and I was the only person with a severe mental illness. Bipolar disorder is severe, and that felt weird and wrong. And I was like, yeah, I feel like there's a better way to do this as well. So I proceeded to host my own panel during July, which is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and tried to make sure that we had representation from various groups. We had someone that represented our Asian Business Resource Group. We had someone that represented our Black Resource Group. We had someone that represented our LGBTQ plus resource group. And that was important to me because we all know representation matters, but also how we navigate dealing with our mental health is different based on our backgrounds, based on our cultural experiences, based on what we consider quote unquote normal. And it's important to share those stories. And since then, we've continued, like we didn't stop with that one panel. I have been very blessed to meet tons of people at Capital One who are like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that we're talking about this. And every year we try to do something different and something bigger and something better to represent associates. And what has happened is it went from being this thing that leaders were like, oh my gosh, why are we talking about this at work? Is it appropriate? Is it okay? to it really turning into us being able to help drive conversations, right? So we have regular meetings with our benefits team to talk about what people are discussing in our Slack channels around mental health and what we're hearing and what we know needs to be fixed, to talk about how do we incorporate manager training. We also get invited to come and speak at departments within the company or externally. So there's so much change that is happening. And then what was so awesome is the increase in benefits that happened this year. And knowing that a lot of that had to do with associates standing up and saying, this is what we need. And now people are able to find them a lot quicker or find someone to help them through their journey. And I'm just grateful to have been a part of that cultural shift and it's continuing and evolving. So it's a huge difference from 2016 searching and not being able to find much of anything to now someone typing in mental health in our internal site and gray matter pops up and it leads them down a path of finding 2,000, almost 2,000 associates who are continuously having a conversation in the Slack channel, and they can say, hey, I have a question, and there's tons of people that send them a message of like, how can I help?
Thanks so much, Angelique. And I wouldn't say that you were hard-headed. I would say you're passionate, and that's probably my favorite part of working with you. I'm lucky I get to work with you many, many days. And so I also am really curious, what has been the most rewarding part for you in working with Gray Matter?
I think helping people, and that sounds very cliche, right? But I'm gonna tell you, I feel like there have been times Gray Matter I have a lot of love for, but sometimes leading it up, I neglect my own mental health, right? Because it's like I'm supposed to represent this group and do it in the right way. And if I come forward and say that I, like every bipolar person, forgets to take her meds, or finds that they dwarf this amazing ability when you're manic, like that's gonna feel weird. And I'm always like, maybe I should pass the baton to someone else. Like maybe I'm not the best leader here, or maybe I'm inexperienced, or whatever doubt that I'm having. But ironically, I get an email. Always, I get an email or a ping, and it said like it says things that I just never thought that I would hear. Like you think like, oh, when I start this group, if I save one person's life, like that sounds very like, who's really gonna save a life with a resource group, right? Like who's gonna do that? And then I get an email that says, Gray Matter saved my life because I was on the edge of ending my life. And then I found Gray Matter, and then I found the resources, and I found a friend, and I found somebody to talk to. I went to your event. I saw you speak. I saw someone else speak. Like those things are impactful, and it reaffirms for me, like, I do this because I want to help people and I want to change the way that we talk about things because I know how much I struggle. And it reaffirms that the doubts that I'm having like need to go away and I just need to keep pushing forward. I can't say enough how much Gray Matter personally has affected me, because I see people and I'm like, I need to go get help myself sometimes, or I need to take better care of me, but also just knowing that there really are people who have been able to connect to each other or find exactly what they were needing in that moment so they don't make a rash decision.
Thank you so much, Angelique. And as an aside, I don't know if you know this, but you are one of the first people that I connected with at Capital One on our internet, and it was because of your connection to Gray Matter. And I know that we connected very early on, so thank you so much for sharing your story. We know that advocacy, support, and allyship comes in many different ways. And Meredith, I want to go back to your conversation several years ago that you mentioned with your manager. If you could go back and tell your manager anything, like what advice would you give to your manager about that conversation, if any?
I think he knows. I think I've told him this. I'm so grateful for that, even that really uncomfortable, hard conversation. I'm grateful that, he cared enough to ask. I think as a manager, especially, like when you're managing people, you know, I think it is considered more of a, you know, I'm at work versus, you know, this is my personal life. And I think it's important for managers to remember that, you know, you can literally save someone's life. You know, Angelique was, you know, commenting on how, you know, so many people have come up to her and discussed how gray matter has impacted their life. I feel very similarly that managers can absolutely do that. And that's why trust is so important. This is a hard topic for a lot of people, and there's no one playbook, both for those that are navigating it or for those that want to understand it. Yeah, you can really have an impact on someone's life. So never take those moments for granted.
Thank you, Meredith. And just to add on to that question, are there any ways that you have been an advocate and ally to them in the past as a result of your experience? And can you talk a bit to us about that?
Yeah, one of my, and I wish I had this analogy early, and I may have heard it from Angelique in my first gray matter interaction that I had, but when I was first diagnosed, I struggled with like understanding like, well, what and why? Because until you experience it, it's very difficult to articulate. But I have, you know, as an ally, when I'm talking to folks who, you know, want to understand more, especially if they're not struggling, or even if they are, liking it to, you know, you wouldn't make fun of someone or, you know, be hesitant to have a conversation if someone had a broken leg or had, you know, a heart attack or something else that folks are a little bit more familiar with, and it has a little bit, you know, less stigma associated, but you would not, you know, fault someone for being disabled in that manner or having that, you know, physical health issue. Mental health, like your brain is an organ, you know, it gets sick too. And when you I've found that like when I can connect that sort of example for people, it clicks. Maybe not in every case, but I think it's very aha moment to realize that like our brains can get sick too and need help too. And that absolutely should not and cannot be stigmatized the way that it currently is.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Meredith. I think the stigma and starting the conversation can be just the hardest point as we think about the taboo of even starting the conversation. I have one more question for both of you before we head into Q&A from the audience, because I know we have quite a few questions that are coming up. What advice or resources would you give to others who are currently navigating mental health challenges in their own workplaces? So I will start with you, Angelique, and then I'll come back with you, Meredith, so you'll have some time to think about that.
I would start with, so first I always tell people, especially if you know or have a genetic propensity for any type of mental health issue, you should seek out a therapist or psychologist, depending on what's going on with you, prior to you needing the help, right? So even if you just keep your therapist for once a month until you need to up your appointments, it's important to have someone that you trust when you don't need like your hand held right now in that moment, because it's very difficult to open up the way that you need to when you are in the middle of a crisis or getting to the point of a crisis when you don't know anyone that is talking to you. Another resource that I feel like is missed a lot are resources that your local hospital or another mental health program in the community may have. Depending on where you are, depends on how easy they are to find. So I will be transparent about that. But partial hospitalization programs and intensive outpatient programs. So people think about, I'm in a crisis, that means that I am not only thinking of killing myself, but I have intention to do so, right? And that's what gets you hospitalized, and that's what prevents people from getting care. However, there is this thing called, I am actually in need of care right now in this moment, doesn't necessarily mean that I am thinking of suicide. As a person with multiple mental illnesses, I get to that place when I am not taking care of myself, and or it just gets really bad. And the partial hospitalization program is where I go, right? So I take time off of work and I actually go every single day to the hospital. I get to go home at night, unlike other people that are hospitalized. But I do have a requirement to show up for whatever the scheduled days are. Where I am, that is 5 days a week. When I'm in the partial hospitalization, they will transition you to 3 days a week, which is the IOP program. It is group therapy, and they get you on a medication plan if you don't have one. It is intense. However, it allows you to do nothing but spend 8 hours a day taking care of your mental health, right? And I feel like that is something that is missed for a lot of people when they are seeking care right now in the moment. The last thing that I'll talk about are leave options. And so we have FMLA. If you have a diagnosed mental illness, you have a disability, you are protected by FMLA. I'm not making this up. You can feel free to go look it up. You're protected by FMLA. So talk to your psychiatrist or your doctor about what is happening to you so that you have a plan in place. So if things get bad, you have the extra breaks already scheduled in job protection, or you have the time to step away and say, I need a day, or I'm going to take the week because it's just that bad. Whatever it is that your doctor and you feel needs to happen, absolutely job protection through FMLA, but you also have short-term disability options if that is offered at your job, right? You also have leave of absence options if you can afford that. I can't, but some people have done that just to take care of themselves. Whatever you need to do to protect your job, protect your time, protect your space, to make sure that you can care for you, I definitely recommend that you do so. Research what that means within your company and do it before a crisis. Prepare for a crisis when you don't have a crisis. I cannot stress that enough, because in the moment of you not being either in your right frame of mind or just overwhelmed, figuring that stuff out then is not the time to do it.
Thanks so much, Angelique. Meredith, do you have any additional resources, programming, thoughts that you would offer to someone who is in similar circumstance?
Honestly, I think Angelique hit it on the head. She covered so many of the options. I'll hammer home. I mean, I was in legal when my mental health crisis occurred, and I knew about FMLA. I knew about short-term disability. I knew those things were there, but I wasn't even capable kind of in the moment. She talks about planning ahead. Plan ahead as if you don't need it, but it's there if you do. And when you do need it, you really will be grateful that you, put those sort of preventative or mitigation measures kind of in place.
Great, thank you so much. So I know that we had some questions that are coming in the chat. One of them is a question around our managers at our companies required to attend training on mental health awareness. And so I can take that one, in that we don't necessarily have a required course as of yet. However, we do partner with a lot of organizations, including Equal, but National Alliance on Mental Illness, our Disability In partners, and we do try to partner with our business resource group to increase awareness about mental health in the workplace. In addition, due to the environment, obviously now that we're in with coronavirus, we do have toolkits for our managers that do have a section on mental health. And so they are able to learn about certain trigger statements or items that they could potentially request resources on, in addition to the FMLA that Angelique mentioned, EAP. It's really important to prepare for these conversations before you actually need to have them in the moment. And so that is a resource that we have been providing our managers the last couple of months. Thank you for that question. scrolling down here. If oh, this is a really good one. This is from Jane Doe. I don't know if that's your real name, but if it is, it's really cool, Jane. I will give this to Meredith. Is there anything that you wish existed before or during any crisis that you've gone through that you would have appreciated then and there that you didn't have in the moment?
You know, no, because I kind of want to go in the opposite direction on that. And that is, tying up what was available and what helped me and my manager in turn were the resources that didn't exist at the time Angelique may have had her experience. That was in 2016, I think I heard. Mine was 2018. By that time, we had created an internet page for managers that highlights trigger words. Like, that's what he went to, I'm pretty sure, to understand like what his next steps were. So I think having that resource, that's what helped my situation personally. So having those very blunt resources available when you need it is necessary.
Thank you, Meredith. And this question is along a similar vein and topic. Angelique, as you think about gray matter, is there something that you learned over time that you would have introduced at the start?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I think gray matter has been a journey. And I took a lot of time before like traveling down the path of like making this a thing to research like what are the limitations and what are the concerns and what is it that is giving everyone such a heart attack, right? I think that I've, again, just the right people, meeting the right individuals. So meeting an HR consulting and meeting the person who does benefits and meeting people in the right corners that bring a lot of knowledge to the table in the very beginning helped set us up properly for assessing for risk. How do we deal with someone who is in a crisis and what should we do? If anything, all the lessons learned has only made us represent every year better. I don't think that there's, I think what we've been very, tried to be very conscientious about what we do and why we're doing it, right? It's not, and honestly, I think just knowing from the very beginning, the question we should always be asking is why are we doing this? And not what's going to be the best thing and what is someone going to be able to attach their name to, or doing things for the wrong reasons, as I like to say, has kept us in a place of caring for people for all the right reasons. And that has led to a lot of success. I think that the entire journey in and of itself has been wonderful. And I don't know if there's anything that I would want to have done differently, just because it's been incremental growth and change. And it has led to a lot of cultural change at Capital One that I'm very proud to be a part of.
Thank you. That was awesome, Angelique. We also have a question, and I know that you both that you decide who wants to take this one, are both active in Slack, but as we think about our Slack communities and our Slack channels, which we have a ton of at Capital One, sometimes it feels like we engage more in Slack than we do any other kind of communication medium. But this question is from Olivia, and she's wondering, are the people anonymous, our associates anonymous on our Slack channels? And how do we support these conversations, knowing that many people probably have questions and they need support, but they don't want to out themselves?
I can take this one. So in the Gray Matter Slack channel, we make it very clear that this is a Capital One owned piece of communication, and with all forms of communication is subject to anyone being able to pop in, right? It's not a closed group. However, we also know through making sure that we've checked all the boxes that HR is not reviewing that channel at all, right? So we can say like HR is not reviewing this channel, but please keep in mind that people are, anyone can read what you write. So if you're calling out your boss, like your boss could be one of the however thousands of people, hundreds of people that are in this channel reading what you write. With that said, I think it's important for us in that transparency. We've still been to also say like there are other ways that you can go about caring for your mental health if you don't want other people to know. So we have people that come in and say, I have a question about fill in the blank, right? So I have a question about leaving work. Can someone help me? And then they go and have a private message conversation offline. So people will volunteer to answer whatever the subject line is, and then they take it offline where the rest of us cannot read it, and we encourage that as well. If it is a question about how to navigate using the benefits, but you are afraid of your manager knowing or someone else in the department knowing, when we go and talk, we make sure that people understand that when you ask for a medical accommodation or FMLA request or you take leave, your manager never knows what it's about unless you choose to say, right? They just get an email that says you've opened a claim, and then they get an email that says, here's the time that this person is allotted, and you can expect them back at work at this time, or this leave is available to them until this time. And that's it. You get to determine what they do and do not know. So we make sure people are aware of what the options are to remain as anonymous as possible. And we make sure that people are aware of that if you come in Slack, it is an open forum. With good intentions, though, I think we've been able to build a community where people feel very comfortable sharing exactly how they feel, and those conversations stay in that Slack channel. But I also think that goes back to the conversation about what is the culture at your company, and what culture are you building when you're talking about mental health. So we attempted, and I feel like so far we've done an amazing job at keeping a safe space for people that stays exactly where people write, and it doesn't leave Slack or Pulse, or which is our internal site, or whatever seminar or whatever we're giving, it stays where it's at and people don't disclose after they leave.
Thanks so much, Angelique. So it looks like we have one more question that's a little bit interesting because I hadn't heard it yet, but I know this is a bigger focus for diversity and inclusion externally. We only have two of our BRGs represented here today, and this question isn't necessarily LGBTQ plus focused, but have we had any type of focus in Gray Matter, Angelique, on health at every size? I know that's often a hashtag is like hashtag HAES. I don't know if that's something that we are going to be exploring in the upcoming year as we think more about wellness holistically.
We have not, in full transparency, but keep in mind, like, we are still technically in the infancy of what a group like us does. This was started in 2017, and it was literally just me the entire year of 2017, right? And then we hosted like 3 panels in 2018 as a starting point. And so 2019 was our official, like, take us seriously in moment of we're here, we're not going anywhere. And we had like a whole theme that year that was based on starting a conversation at work. So we're literally 1 year into after starting a conversation at work. And there's so many things that we want to talk about. We want to talk about body positivity, of course, and we do make connections between mental health and taking care of your body, but also accepting your body as it is. Like, those are things that we have done incrementally. You know, we want to talk about how it affects different people of different cultures and races, as well as caregivers, right? My mother has bipolar disorder, and I did not understand that growing up or even as an adult until I was diagnosed with what that meant for her. And so there's so many things that we have a list of that we want to run down. And so I'm just really excited for all of the upcoming topics and years that we can address, but that's definitely something we should probably put forward, as so many people probably need that.
Yeah, I just wrote that down, Angelique, for our upcoming strategy discussion in like 2 weeks. So we'll chat more about it then. Thank you so much, Eve and Jessica, or Eve, for that question. It's a huge topic, as you mentioned. So I know that we're at time and you all have a lot of other exciting sessions to get to this afternoon, but just wanted to thank again Meredith and Angelique for you sharing your stories with us and being so open and transparent about your experiences. And thank all of you here at Out and Equal for joining our panel session today, and we hope to see you next year.